Commander Kale Nine studied the tactical display with satisfaction. His 3 Zephyrian patrol ships moved through space like dancers, each movement precise and calculated. The crew moved efficiently around him on the bridge, their blue-scaled faces calm and focused. This was how proper military operations should work. "Commander," his communications officer announced, "we are receiving a distress signal from the border region." Kale Nine's tail flicked with mild interest. Border incidents were common, but usually minor. Pirates, smugglers, the occasional territorial dispute. Nothing his experienced crews could not handle quickly and professionally. "Display the signal," he ordered. The main screen filled with static and broken transmissions. Through the noise, Kale Nine could make out panicked voices speaking in the human language. The translation systems struggled to keep up with their rapid, emotional speech. Unknown attackers. Colony ship. Under assault. Requesting immediate assistance. They are not responding to communications. Kale Nine's secondary eyes narrowed. Humans were still relatively new to this region of space. Their technology was primitive compared to Zephyrian standards. But galactic law required all spacefaring species to respond to legitimate distress calls. "Set course for the transmission source," he commanded. "Battle readiness level 2. The journey took 30 minutes at standard speed. As they approached the coordinates, Kale Nine saw something that made him pause. A massive human colony ship hung in space, surrounded by smaller vessels that looked like nothing in any database. The unknown ships were dark, angular things that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "Sir, the unknown vessels are attacking the human ship," his tactical officer reported. "They appear to be trying to board it." Through his ship's sensors, Kale Nine watched the battle. The human defenders fought desperately, but their weapons seemed barely effective against the strange attackers. Energy beams that should have destroyed targets instead seemed to be absorbed or deflected. "Open a channel to the human vessel," Kale Nine ordered. The face that appeared on screen was young and determined. The human wore a blue uniform with captain's insignia and had short black hair. Despite the chaos around him, his voice was steady. "This is Captain Min Jun Park of the colony ship New Seoul. We are under attack by unknown hostiles. They have already boarded 3 of our escort ships. I am Commander Kale Nine of the Zephyrian Patrol Fleet," Kale Nine replied formally. "We will assist according to galactic emergency protocols." Captain Park's relief was visible. "Thank you. We have 15,000 civilians aboard, including children. The attackers seem to want to capture our ship intact." Kale Nine studied the tactical situation. The unknown vessels were clearly more advanced than human technology. But they did not appear to be more advanced than Zephyrian ships. A standard engagement should resolve this quickly. "Begin attack pattern." "Delta 7. He commanded his fleet. "Target the largest enemy vessels first." The Zephyrian ships moved into formation and opened fire. Their energy weapons were precise and powerful, designed to disable enemy ships with minimal damage. It was the civilized way to conduct warfare. The results were immediate and shocking. The unknown ships absorbed the energy weapons completely, as if the powerful beams simply vanished into their hulls. Instead of retreating or requesting terms, they turned toward the Zephyrian ships with what could only be described as hunger. "Sir," his tactical officer said, voice tight with concern, "our weapons are having no effect. The enemy ships are accelerating toward us." Before Kale Nine could respond, Captain Park's voice crackled over the communication channel. "Commander, those things eat energy. Kinetic weapons work better, but they adapt fast. We call them the swarm." Kale Nine felt a chill run through his scales. An enemy that adapted to weapons in real time was beyond anything in Zephyrian military doctrine. His training had not prepared him for this. "Switch to kinetic projectiles," he ordered quickly. The Zephyrian ships adjusted their weapons systems. Solid projectiles fired from magnetic accelerators struck the swarm vessels and caused visible damage. But even as they watched, the enemy ships began to develop armor plating to deflect the kinetic rounds. "They are learning," Kale-9 muttered. The battle became chaotic. The swarm vessels split up and attacked from multiple directions. Their own weapons fired beams of dark energy that seemed to drain power from whatever they touched. When a swarm beam hit one of Kale-9's ships, entire sections went dark. It was then that Kale-9 witnessed something that confused him completely. 3 human escort ships had been damaged and were drifting without power. The logical action would be to abandon them and protect the main colony vessel. Instead, Kale-9 watched as human fighters launched from New Sol and flew directly toward the disabled ships. "What are they doing?" he asked Captain Park. "Rescue mission," Park replied simply. "Those ships have crew aboard. But the tactical situation requires protecting the main vessel," Kale-9 pointed out. "Those smaller ships cannot be saved without risking the larger population." Captain Park's expression became hard. "We don't leave people behind. Ever." Kale-9 watched in amazement as the human rescue ships flew into the most dangerous part of the battle zone. A woman's voice came over the communication frequency, calm and professional despite the chaos around her. "This is Sergeant So-Young Kim, approaching disabled ship Busan. Preparing for emergency evacuation." The swarm vessels immediately targeted the rescue ships. It would have been simple for the humans to retreat and preserve their forces. Instead, they fought harder. Kale-9 saw human fighters deliberately place themselves between swarm vessels and the rescue operations, taking damage to protect ships that were trying to save others. A young voice came over the radio. "Private Jae-ho Lee here. I've got wounded on ship Daegu. Need cover for medical evacuation." Without being ordered, other human ships moved to protect the medical evacuation. They took terrible damage, but they held their positions until every wounded person was safely transferred. Kale-9 had never seen anything like it. The humans were fighting according to principles he did not understand. They valued individual lives over tactical advantage. They refused to make the rational choice to sacrifice the few for the many. Working together, the combined human and Zephyrian forces finally drove off the swarm vessels. But Kale-9 could see on his long-range sensors that this was only a small advance force. Something much larger was coming. "Captain Park," he said slowly, "this was just the beginning, was it not?" Park's face was grim. "Long-range scanners show a fleet of over 200 swarm vessels heading this way. They will arrive in approximately 6 days." Kale-9 felt fear, a sensation he had rarely experienced. Not fear of death, but fear of something he could not understand. These humans fought like no species he had ever encountered. They terrified him, and he could not explain why. 3 weeks had passed since the first battle with the swarm. Commander Kale-9 stood in the command center of Bastion 7, a hastily constructed military base built into an asteroid. Around him, human and Zephyrian officers worked side by side, planning their defense against the approaching swarm fleet. The base was a miracle of cooperation. Zephyrian engineers had provided the advanced shield generators and power systems, while human construction crews had worked around the clock to build the facilities. Kale-9 had never seen such rapid construction. The humans seemed to need very little sleep. "Commander." Captain Min-jun Park approached with a datapad in his hands. "The latest intelligence reports." Kale-9 accepted the device and studied the information. The swarm fleet was larger than originally estimated. Nearly 400 vessels, each one capable of adapting to any weapon used against it. The combined human-Zephyrian force had maybe 60 ships. "The odds are not favorable," Kale-9 observed. "They never are," Park replied with what humans called a smile. "That is why we fight harder." Oh. Kale-9 still did not understand this human logic. Zephyrian military doctrine taught that unfavorable odds meant strategic withdrawal to fight another day. Humans seemed to believe that unfavorable odds meant they should try harder. Colonel Hyejin Choi entered the command center. She was the senior human officer, a woman with gray in her hair and scars on her hands from years of combat. Behind her walked Admiral Thek Prime, Kyle 9's superior, and the overall Zephyrian commander. "We need to discuss ship assignments," Colonel Choi announced. "Our combined fleet needs to maximize effectiveness." Admiral Thek Prime activated the tactical display. Ships appeared as colored dots, blue for Zephyrian vessels, green for human ships. The Zephyrian ships were clearly superior in most ways. Better shields, more powerful weapons, faster engines. "I propose that human vessels serve as forward scouts and decoys," Admiral Thek Prime said. "Their ships are less valuable and more expendable. This will allow our main battle units to position for maximum effect." Kale 9 expected the humans to object to being called expendable. Instead, Colonel Choi simply nodded. "Agreed. Our people understand the risks." "You accept this assignment?" Kale 9 asked, surprised. "Our ships are not as advanced as yours," Colonel Choi replied simply. "We should use what we have where it helps most. If that means drawing enemy fire, so be it." The first joint training exercise took place 2 days later. Kale 9 observed from the command deck of his ship as human and Zephyrian vessels practiced coordinated maneuvers. The humans were quick learners, but their ships had obvious limitations. During the exercise, a simulated swarm attack targeted one of the Zephyrian vessels. According to the plan, the human ships were supposed to maintain their positions and provide covering fire. Instead, they immediately moved to protect the Zephyrian ship, placing themselves directly in the line of simulated enemy fire. "Why did you break formation?" Kale 9 asked Sergeant So Young Kim over the communication link. "Ship Gyeongju was taking heavy fire," she replied. "They needed help. But your orders were to maintain position. The simulation was testing our ability to follow tactical doctrine. Sir, with respect, our doctrine is that we protect our allies. Everything else is secondary." After the exercise, Kale 9 found Private Jae-ho Lee in the base recreation area. The young human was cleaning his weapon, a simple projectile rifle that looked primitive next to Zephyrian energy weapons. Lee could not have been much older than 20 standard years. "Private Lee," Kale 9 said, sitting down across from him, "I have observed that you volunteer for the most dangerous assignments. Why?" Lee looked up from his weapon. His face was young, but his eyes seemed older. "My sister lives on Kepler 442b. The swarm is heading that way after they finish with us. Someone has to stop them. But there are many soldiers here. Why must it be you personally?" "Because I can help," Lee replied, as if the answer was obvious. "If I do not try, who will?" Kale 9 found this reasoning confusing. Zephyrian soldiers fought for the glory of their clans, for advancement in rank, or for the honor of victory. This human fought for someone who was not even present, someone who would never know if he succeeded or failed. The first real joint combat operation took place when swarm scouts arrived early. 3 enemy vessels appeared at the edge of the system and began attacking commercial shipping. The response force consisted of 2 Zephyrian ships and 4 human vessels. Kale 9 commanded the mission from his ship Stellar Pride. The engagement began according to plan, with human ships drawing the swarm vessels into range of Zephyrian heavy weapons. But when one of the human ships suffered critical damage, everything changed. The damaged ship was Daegu, with 30 crew members aboard. Standard military doctrine required abandoning the vessel and retreating to preserve the remaining forces. The ship's power was failing, and it could not maneuver. Instead of retreating, the other human ships immediately moved to protect Daegu. They formed a defensive circle around the disabled vessel and called for emergency evacuation ships. "This is tactically unsound," Kale 9 transmitted to Captain Park. "You are risking additional ships for one that is already lost." "Negative, Commander," Park replied. "Those are our people. We bring them home." KL-9 watched as the human ships took terrible damage protecting their disabled comrade. Sergeant Kim's vessel lost its main engines. Private Lee's fighter squadron was reduced to half strength. But they held their positions until rescue ships could evacuate every single crew member from the damaged vessel. The operation succeeded, but barely. 3 human ships were severely damaged and would need weeks of repairs. For the Zephyrians, the cost was unacceptable for saving 30 people. "Captain Park," KL-9 said after the battle, "your people fought bravely, but those losses were unnecessary. In the greater war, 30 lives cannot be worth 3 ships." Park looked at him with an expression KL-9 was learning to recognize. Humans made this face when they were trying to explain something they thought was obvious. "Commander, every person on that ship has family, friends, people who love them. How do I tell a mother that I decided her son was not worth saving? How do I tell a wife that her husband was acceptable losses? You tell them that their sacrifice allowed others to live. That is the mathematics of war. Maybe for your people," Park said quietly, "but not for us. We believe that every life has value that cannot be measured. When we abandon people to save resources, we lose what makes us worth fighting for." That night, KL-9 lay in his quarters thinking about the human concept of individual value. In Zephyrian society, individuals served the collective. Personal desires were less important than the needs of the clan. But humans seemed to believe that protecting individuals was the whole point of having a collective. It was a terrifying way to fight a war. How could you make rational tactical decisions when emotions clouded your judgment? How could you win when you valued enemy lives almost as much as your own? And yet, the humans kept fighting. They kept protecting each other. They kept refusing to abandon anyone, no matter the cost. For the first time in his military career, KL-9 began to wonder if there was something wrong with rational tactics. The alarm sirens on Bastion 7 had been wailing for 6 hours. Commander KL-9 stood in the command center watching the tactical display with growing dread. The main swarm fleet had arrived at Kepler 442b, exactly as predicted. 237 vessels, each one hungry for organic matter to consume. "Final evacuation transports are leaving the surface now," reported Colonel Hee-jin Choi. Her voice was steady, but KL-9 could see the stress lines around her eyes. Kepler 442b housed 12 million people across 14 cities. "How many civilians remain?" Admiral Thek Prime asked. "Approximately 40,000 in the industrial sectors," Captain Min Jun Park replied. "They refused evacuation orders, said someone needed to keep the manufacturing plants running until the last moment." KL-9's tail twitched with frustration. "This is illogical. The industrial output cannot be worth civilian lives. Try telling that to the workers," Park said quietly. "They know that every weapon, every spare part, every supply crate they produce might save lives elsewhere." The combined fleet departed Bastion 7 inches full battle formation. 63 ships against more than 200. The humans had insisted on leading the first wave, claiming their ships were better suited for reconnaissance. KL-9 suspected they simply wanted to be the first to face danger. As they approached Kepler 442b, the scope of the swarm attack became clear. The massive industrial world was surrounded by a cloud of dark vessels. Some were already extending mechanical tentacles toward the planet's surface, beginning the harvesting process. "Enemy fleet is moving to intercept us," announced the tactical officer. "They are maintaining formation around the planet. They want us to come to them." It was a trap, obviously. The swarm wanted the combined fleet to attack their defensive positions around the planet. Any rational military commander would refuse the engagement and withdraw to better tactical ground. "All ships," Captain Park transmitted, "begin attack run. Primary objective is breaking the planetary blockade." KL-9 activated his private channel to Admiral Thek Prime. "Sir, this engagement is tactically unsound. We should withdraw and engage them in open space. I agree with the assessment, the Admiral replied. But the humans will not abandon their civilians. If we retreat, they will attack alone and be destroyed. Then we let them make that choice. Preserving our forces is more important than human emotional reactions. Admiral Thek Prime was quiet for a moment. 3 weeks ago, I would have agreed with you. Watch the humans fight, Commander. Learn what we can from them before passing judgment. The battle began badly and became worse. The swarm had been studying their tactics and had adapted accordingly. Energy weapons that had worked in previous engagements were now completely ineffective. Kinetic weapons worked, but only briefly before the enemy developed countermeasures. KL-9 watched the human ships take terrible losses. They flew directly into the strongest enemy positions, absorbing damage that would have destroyed Zephyrian vessels. But they kept fighting, kept pushing forward toward the planet. Sergeant Kim to all units, came a transmission from one of the human ships. I am reading massive civilian concentrations in Sector 7. The swarm is beginning harvesting operations. He was maggoted. Through his ship's sensors, KL-9 could see the truth of her report. Swarm vessels were deploying mechanical harvesters on the planet's surface. Lines of civilians were being processed through alien machinery, their organic matter consumed to fuel the enemy fleet. This is Private J-Ho Lee, came another voice over the communication system, requesting permission to begin ground assault on Sector 7 harvesting sites. Negative. Captain Park replied immediately. Ground forces cannot operate in that environment. The swarm controls local airspace. Sir, those are civilians down there. We cannot leave them. KL-9 switched his display to observe Private Lee's fighter squadron. The young human was leading 12 small ships toward the planet's surface, directly through the heaviest concentration of enemy vessels. It was suicide. Private Lee, return to formation immediately, Captain Park ordered. Cannot comply, sir. Those people need help now. Lee out. KL-9 watched in fascination and horror as Lee's squadron dove toward the planet. Swarm interceptors swarmed toward them like insects. The human fighters were vastly outnumbered and outgunned, but other human ships immediately moved to support them. Sergeant Kim's damaged cruiser changed course to provide cover fire. Other squadrons abandoned their assigned targets to help with the rescue mission. All ships, this is Colonel Choi, came the fleet commander's voice. Primary mission is now ground support for civilian evacuation. All other objectives are secondary. Admiral Thek Prime activated his private channel to KL-9. Did you hear that? They just changed the entire battle plan to save civilians who disobeyed evacuation orders. It is militarily insane, KL-9 replied. Yes, it is. The battle for Kepler 442b lasted 14 hours. The human ships fought with desperate fury, throwing themselves against impossible odds, again and again. KL-9 watched Dr. Min Seo-jung coordinate medical evacuations under heavy fire, her hospital ship taking damage but never retreating. He watched Captain Park lead a direct assault on a swarm capital ship, his cruiser absorbing enough damage to kill everyone aboard 3 times over, but somehow staying in the fight long enough to destroy the target. He watched Private Lee's squadron rescue over 3,000 civilians from the surface, losing 8 of their 12 ships in the process. Lee himself ejected from his burning fighter just meters above a crowd of trapped civilians, then organized ground defenses until rescue ships could arrive. The humans lost 37 ships in the battle. The Zephyrians lost 4. By any rational measure, the humans had fought poorly and taken unacceptable casualties. But they had saved every civilian who could be saved. Every transport that reached orbit carried people who would have died without human intervention. Families stayed together. Children survived. The evacuation was considered a complete success. After the battle, KL-9 found Dr. Jung in the medical bay treating wounded soldiers. She had been awake for 18 hours straight and had visible injuries from when her ship took damage, but she continued working. Doctor, you should rest, Kale-9 told her. She looked up from a wounded Zephyrian soldier she was treating. These people trusted me to save them. I cannot rest until they are safe. But you are injured yourself. Logic suggests you should preserve your own health to help more people later. Dr. Jung smiled. The same expression humans made when they thought something was obvious. Commander, if I started making decisions based on what was logical, instead of what was right, I would not be the person these soldiers trusted to save them. That night, Kale-9 stood in his quarters, looking out at the stars. The human concept of fighting was still alien to him, but he was beginning to understand why it terrified him. Humans did not fight for logical reasons. They fought for love, for protection, for the simple belief that every life had value beyond calculation. They made decisions with their emotions instead of their minds. And somehow, it worked. Somehow, their irrational dedication to protecting others made them stronger than any logical military force. For the first time in his life, Kale-9 wondered if logic was enough. Commander Kale-9 had been promoted to Joint Operations Commander, a title that meant very little when there were barely enough ships left to form a single fleet. The swarm had gathered everything they had for one final assault. Their target was Earth itself, the human homeworld. From his position on the bridge of the combined fleet flagship, Kale-9 watched the tactical display with what humans called dread. Over 400 swarm vessels surrounded Earth's solar system. Every human ship that could fly had rushed to defend their home. Mining vessels, cargo haulers, even civilian transports had been hastily fitted with weapons. Sir, Lieutenant So-Young Kim reported from her station, we are receiving surrender offers from the swarm. They promise to preserve human genetic material if we cease resistance. Kale-9 looked toward Admiral Min-Jun Park, who had been promoted after Captain Park died at Kepler 442b. The new admiral's face showed no emotion as he read the surrender terms. Response? Kale-9 asked. Admiral Park deleted the message without reading it completely. We do not surrender while Earth stands. Transmit fleet-wide. All ships prepare for final engagement. Admiral Thek Prime approached from his command station. The elderly Zephyrian looked tired. Commander, our analysis shows a 12% chance of victory. Logic suggests we should evacuate what forces we can to fight another day. And abandon Earth? Kale-9 asked. It is one planet. Humanity has colonies throughout this region of space. The species would survive. Kale-9 had heard this argument many times over the past months. In Zephyrian military doctrine, it made perfect sense. Preserve your forces, retreat to advantageous positions, live to fight when you have better odds. But he had been watching humans fight for months now. He understood something that Zephyrian doctrine had never taught him. Admiral, with respect, the humans will never abandon Earth. They will fight here regardless of our decision. The only choice is whether we fight beside them or let them die alone. Through the ship's communication system, Kale-9 listened to the human fleet preparations. Civilian vessels reported their status alongside military ships. Cargo pilots joked with fighter pilots. Medical teams prepared for casualties that everyone knew would be massive. This is Dr. Min-Seo Jung, aboard medical ship Seoul, came a familiar voice. All trauma units are prepared. We will not abandon any wounded, regardless of species. Dr. Jung had lost both legs during the battle for Mars, but she continued to serve. She coordinated medical operations from a hover chair, refusing offers to evacuate to safer positions. Kale-9 had learned to respect her dedication. All ships, this is Admiral Park, came the fleet commander's voice. In approximately 1 hour, we will engage the enemy fleet. Some of you are asking why we fight when the odds are so poor. The answer is simple. This is our home. These are our families. We fight because there is nowhere else to go, and no one else to protect them. Kale-9 activated his private communication with Admiral Thek Prime. Sir, I request permission to speak to our fleet. Granted, Kale 9 opened a channel to all Zephyrian ships. This is Commander Kale 9, to all Zephyrian vessels. I know that many of you question why we remain for this battle. Our doctrine teaches strategic withdrawal when facing overwhelming odds. But I have learned something from fighting beside humanity that our doctrine never taught. He paused, thinking of Private Lee dying to save civilians who were strangers to him. Of Dr. Jung, treating wounded enemies with the same care as her own people. Of Admiral Park refusing to abandon anyone under his protection. I have learned that some things are worth dying for. Not for glory, not for conquest, but for the simple belief that protecting others is more important than preserving ourselves. Today we fight not as allies of humanity, but as humans ourselves. All ships, prepare for battle. The final engagement began when the swarm fleet moved toward Earth. The combined human-Zephyrian force met them at the orbit of Mars. It was immediately clear that they were massively outnumbered. But the humans fought as Kale 9 had learned to expect. They threw themselves against impossible odds with fury that defied logic. Civilian cargo ships rammed swarm cruisers. Fighter pilots continued attacking even after their weapons ran out of ammunition. Lieutenant Kim's ship lost its main engines early in the battle, but she used maneuvering thrusters to position her vessel between a swarm battleship and a damaged medical transport. Her ship absorbed enough firepower to level a city, but she held position until the medical ship escaped. Dr. Jung's hospital ship took multiple hits, but she continued operating on wounded soldiers even as sections of her ship lost atmosphere. When Kale 9 offered to evacuate her medical team to his ship, she refused. "These people trust me to save them," she said over the communication link. "I will not abandon that trust." The battle turned when Admiral Park made a decision that violated every principle of military command. With his flagship severely damaged, he ordered a direct assault on the swarm command vessel. It was a suicide mission, with no tactical benefit. "Admiral, that target is too heavily defended," Kale 9 protested. "You will be destroyed before you can cause significant damage." "Maybe," Admiral Park replied. "But if we can disrupt their command structure, it might give the rest of the fleet a chance." Kale 9 watched as Admiral Park's ship flew directly into the heart of the enemy formation. Dozens of swarm vessels concentrated their fire on the human flagship. The ship's shields failed, then its hull began to break apart. But Park did not retreat. He kept flying toward the command ship, his vessel disintegrating around him. Other human ships followed, adding their fire to his suicidal assault. They knew they were dying, but they kept fighting. In that moment, Kale 9 finally understood what had terrified him about humans from the beginning. It was not their weapons or their tactics. It was their absolute refusal to give up hope even when facing certain death. They fought not because they were not afraid, but because they were afraid and did it anyway. They were terrified of losing everything they loved, so they became willing to sacrifice everything to protect it. "All ships," Kale 9 transmitted to the entire fleet, "follow Admiral Park. Target the command vessel. All ships, ramming speed." Admiral Thek Prime looked at him in shock. "Commander, that is a direct violation of Zephyrian military doctrine." "Yes, sir, it is." The combined fleet followed the dying human flagship toward the swarm command vessel. Ships from both species flew into certain death. Their only goal, to protect the planet behind them. They fought with human courage and human hope. Admiral Park's ship finally reached the swarm command vessel and detonated its remaining fuel in a massive explosion. The blast damaged the enemy ship's control systems and disrupted communications across the swarm fleet. In the confusion that followed, the remaining human and Zephyrian ships pressed their attack. They fought with desperation, born of love for what they were protecting. Somehow, impossibly, they began to win. When the last swarm vessel was destroyed, only 17 ships remained from the original combined fleet. Earth was safe, but the cost had been enormous. Kale 9 sat in his damaged command chair, looking at the blue planet that humans called home. He finally understood why they had fought so hard for it. It was not just a world to them. It was the place where everything they loved existed. For the first time in his life, he understood what humans meant when they said some things were worth dying for. 6 months after the war ended, Commander Kale-9 stood before a memorial wall on the rebuilt colony of New Sol. Thousands of names were carved into the black stone, representing beings from dozens of species who had died fighting the swarm. Human names were listed alongside Zephyrian ones, with no distinction between them. The memorial ceremony was attended by survivors from both species. Kale-9 wore his dress uniform, which now included several human military decorations alongside his traditional Zephyrian honors. The combination still looked strange to him, but it felt right. Today we remember those who chose courage over comfort, Kale-9 said to the mixed crowd of humans and Zephyrians. Those who faced their greatest fears and acted anyway. Those who showed us what it truly means to be strong. In the front row, Captain So-Young Kim sat in a hover chair similar to Dr. Jung's. She had lost her legs during the final battle at Earth, but she still served in the combined fleet. Her injuries had not slowed her down noticeably. Dr. Min Seo-Young sat beside her, now the chief medical officer for the entire sector. Despite her disabilities, she had continued to save lives throughout the reconstruction period. She had become a symbol of human determination for both species. 6 months ago, I believed that fear was weakness, Kale-9 continued. I believed that logical thinking was always superior to emotional reactions. I believed that protecting others was less important than preserving yourself. He paused, looking at the memorial wall. Private Jae-ho Lee's name was there, along with thousands of others who had died protecting strangers. Their sacrifice had saved not just Earth, but dozens of worlds throughout the sector. Fighting beside humanity showed me terror like never before. Not the terror of facing a superior enemy, but the terror of understanding what real strength looks like. Humans do not fight because they are fearless. They fight because they are afraid and choose to act anyway. Admiral Thek Prime sat in the audience, nodding slowly. The old Zephyrian had spent months studying human military psychology and had reached similar conclusions. The Zephyrian High Command was now implementing new training programs based on human concepts of military honor. In Zephyrian military academies, we now teach courses on protective courage, Kale-9 explained. Young officers learn that true tactical advantage comes not from superior technology, but from the willingness to sacrifice for others. They study human battle records to understand how emotional commitment can overcome logical limitations. After the ceremony, Kale-9 walked through the memorial garden with Captain Kim. The space was filled with flowering trees from both Earth and the Zephyrian homeworld, creating a mixture of colors and scents that neither species had experienced before. Commander, Captain Kim said, I wanted to thank you for something. What is that? For learning to understand us instead of just fighting alongside us. Many military alliances are based on shared interests or common enemies. What we have is different. Kale-9 considered her words. How is it different? You did not just become our ally, she replied. You became our friend. You learned to value what we value. That changes everything. They walked in comfortable silence past a playground where human and Zephyrian children played together. The young ones seemed to have no difficulty accepting each other, switching between languages and play styles without thinking about species differences. The children adapt faster than we do, Kale-9 observed. They always do. They have not learned to be afraid of differences yet. Dr. Jung approached them from the medical center, moving efficiently in her hover chair. Despite her injuries, she still maintained a busy schedule of surgeries and research. Her latest project involved combining human and Zephyrian medical techniques. Commander, Captain. She greeted them with a smile. How are the memorial preparations proceeding? Very well, Doctor. The dedication ceremony tomorrow should be well attended. Dr. Jung nodded. Good. It is important that we remember what was lost. But it is also important that we remember what was gained. What do you mean? Kale-9 asked. Before the war, humans and Zephyrians were polite neighbors. We traded, we followed diplomatic protocols, but we did not really know each other. The war forced us to understand each other at the deepest level. Kale-9 thought about this. You mean the sacrifice created bonds that peace could not? Exactly. When you risk your life for someone, when you see them risk theirs for you, it creates trust that cannot be built any other way. That evening, Kale-9 sat in his quarters writing his final report on the war. The official histories would record ship movements, casualty figures, and tactical analyses. But his personal report focused on something else entirely. The human concept of fighting is initially confusing to Zephyrian military thinking. He wrote, They make decisions based on emotional attachments rather than logical calculations. They prioritize individual lives over tactical advantages. They refuse to abandon allies, even when such abandonment would serve the greater good. He paused, thinking about Private Lee dying to save civilians, about Dr. Jung treating enemies with the same care as friends, about Admiral Park flying into certain death to protect a planet he would never see again. These apparent weaknesses are actually the source of humanity's greatest strength. Their willingness to sacrifice for others inspires others to sacrifice for them. Their refusal to abandon allies creates loyalty that no amount of technology can match. Their emotional decision-making leads to tactical innovations that pure logic cannot achieve. Kale-9 saved the report and walked to his window. Outside, he could see the lights of New Seoul spreading across the horizon. The city was larger than it had been before the war, built to accommodate both human and Zephyrian residents. What fighting beside humanity taught me, he wrote in his final entry, is that courage is not the absence of fear, but action in spite of fear. That protecting others is not weakness, but the highest form of strength. That love is not a tactical disadvantage, but a force that can overcome any enemy. He submitted the report to Zephyrian High Command, knowing it would change how his people thought about warfare. Young Zephyrian officers would study human battle tactics not to copy their technology, but to understand their motivations. The next morning, Kale-9 attended the final memorial ceremony. Representatives from dozens of species had come to honor those who died fighting the swarm. But the ceremony was not just about mourning. It was about celebrating what had been learned. We gather not just to remember the dead, the ceremony leader announced, but to honor the living. To celebrate the bonds formed through shared sacrifice. To pledge that what was learned through war will be preserved in peace. As the ceremony ended, Kale-9 realized that humanity had changed not just his understanding of warfare, but his understanding of what it meant to be alive. They had shown him that the things worth living for were the same things worth dying for. Family, friends, the belief that every life has value, the conviction that protecting others is more important than protecting yourself. These were human ideas that had become universal truths. Walking through the memorial garden one last time, Kale-9 reflected on how much had changed. 6 months ago, he had been a Zephyrian military officer who fought alongside human allies. Now he was something new entirely. He was someone who had learned to be human, regardless of what species he belonged to. And that, he realized, was the greatest victory of all.